Good afternoon, everybody. Um, it would have been a much better experience if I was before you, speaking with you, able to gauge the response of the audience and able to benefit from the interactive nature of the gathering that I'm sure you are all enjoying. But I will content myself with speaking with you via this recording. I am deeply appreciative of the invitation and again accept my apologies for not being physically present. It was particularly intriguing for me when I was informed that the theme of your symposium is Reimagining Nigeria. This is of particular importance to me because I have been saying for some years now that the Nigeria that we have today is already dead. And if we want to be perhaps a little more optimistic, we might say that it is dying. I believe the first time I screamed out and said that Nigeria is dying, must be about 7 years or so ago. It was very easy to see the decay that was already overtaking the country at the time and the putrefaction that has completely overtaken the country today. And I remember that in the lead up to the 2023 election, I think around 2021 or 2022, I was asked a question related to the candidates that were emerging as at that time. And I was very careful in saying that anybody who was going to come after Muhammadu Buhari would have to reimagine Nigeria so that he might save it by harnessing the powers of the people, creating the synergy that would be required to save the country that had already, as of 2021, 2022, been destroyed effectively by Muhammadu Buhari's nepotism, the state complicity in the terror that has overtaken the country today. Everything about the country was already suggestive of a state that was unraveling. But when I spoke at the time, I was speaking in the knowledge of the inevitable about today. But to bring this closer to home, I would harness my thoughts so that I can address the specific subject I have been asked to address in relation to the symposium. And that is the one that's governance and institution, building foundations for a resilient future. Long topic, but very simple answer. That simple answer will flow into the multiple issues that I would proceed to discuss thereafter. But I believe that the most important thing that we need to understand is that nothing built on a foundation of lies ever endures. Nigeria of today is built on a foundation of lies, and that is why it cannot be yoked to the rule of law. In the absence of the rule of law, Nigeria is dying or is dead. So if we're talking about building a resilient future, if we're referring to governance and institutions that would uphold governance and ensure that it's sustainable, and we're speaking of a resilient future, then it must be of exceedingly important urgency that we concede to ourselves that we cannot continue to build on the existing structures which are found on lies. So we first of all have to tell ourselves some basic truths so that as we're building, we keep in mind one very critical issue, and that is that everything we must build for them to be resilient and for it to be sustainable must be found on truth. So we need to tell ourselves some very uncomfortable truths. One of the first ones that we need to tell ourselves is that Nigeria as it is today does not function on the rule of law. So to build a sustainable future, a governance system and institutions that would be resilient into the future. We must build on a foundation of truth, which must be aligned to the rule of law. So you subject everybody to the rule of law, but more importantly, the institutions of governance, the state itself must be firmly yoked to law. This is one thing that has always been absent in Nigeria, and this is why Nigeria has never found the capacity to treat its people as citizens. So now, if we need to build sustainable futures and build institutions that would endure into the future, you will require the buy-in of the people themselves. So this is the point where you begin to deal with the utilitarian value of design options. In building anything that will last, be that a house or an institution, the first thing that you must ask yourself is, what is the purpose? If the purpose of the institutions that are to be built is that they should endure into the future, we must then clearly understand the need to build them based on set standards. Set standards can never be achieved outside of the law. So the first standard that must be achieved is that the state must be yoked to the rule of law. Having done this, question is, what is the value of the governance system to the people? First thing, utilitarian. It must be able to deliver the value sought by the people. So what is the first thing that the people will be looking for? Security. Second thing, value for money. So you look at the existing governance structure of Nigeria and you find very quickly that this is the part where reimagining becomes an issue. How do you reimagine a system that is already admitted as being useless? I would imagine that the first thing to do would be to ask yourself, what are the lapses in the existing system? And what is the historical trajectory of the existing system? Number one, Nigeria today has a 36 state structure. If you factor in the lies the Supreme Court has legalized, you have to say 37 states, since Wike is essentially a governor of the 37 states, which is the federal capital, which by interpretation of Nigerian law since after the 2023 election is effectively the 37th state. Now, to have 37 states and 774 local governments and God knows how many local local council development areas, which are essentially lies found on the existing lie of the constitution. So first, you need to restructure the country. How did the country start? It started with 3 regions. The regions became 4 through a process that was pre-agreed and that was followed. Beyond those 4, no other consultation was done before Nigeria became the 37 states that it is today. The reality is that it doesn't work. Too much is being spent on governance in Nigeria. And governance is not even happening because it is not connected to the people. So the first thing you need to do is look for a consensus agreement upon which you may base the restructuring of Nigeria. Since the time of Abacha, since after the Abacha Constitutional Conference, there has been a hardening of a resolve in Nigeria to treat Nigeria as being 6 in relation to geopolitical zones. Having seen the wide acceptance that this has gained amongst Nigerians, in my work, Do Not Die in Their War, there is a draft constitution that was attached as an annexure. And in that draft constitution, we argued that Nigeria reverts to the regional system, a federal system based on regions numbering 6. We made further recommendations that we revert back to the parliamentary system of governance, which allows for wider representation for the multiple ethnicities and identities in Nigeria. We asked that party registration be liberalized or cancelled to allow persons to stand as independent candidates able to stand for parliamentary seats and able to represent even minorities who might ordinarily not have been able to be represented. There are multiple problems with the current system that we have in Nigeria. But the primary one is the fact that it is divorced from the people. It is divorced from the people because the people's votes counts for nothing, and the electoral bodies are able to manipulate and name whoever they care. All these are possible because we are not operating a rule-based system. Impunity governs the affairs of Nigeria, and this has been particularly more so because there is no template for who the Nigerian is and exactly what his powers, his privileges, and his rights are. If you go back to a rule-based system with clear input from those who should be citizens but are currently victims, what you find very quickly is that when those who are ruling become aware of the fact that they are going to be required to account for their powers in periodic elections that will not be decided by the courts but by the people themselves, there will be significant return to sanity in Nigeria. The most difficult of our challenges, which has also militated against the capacity to build enduring institutions, is the fact that there are actually very few, if any, Nigerians in Nigeria. Nigeria has enough Igbo men and women. It has enough Yoruba people. He has Hausas, he has Fulani, he has Ibiobio, he has Ijo, but he has very few Nigerians. There are more Liverpool football team supporters in Nigeria than Nigerians. This is illustrative of the fact that you do not have a template for a Nigerian because we treat ourselves as one of our many divisions, not as individuals. So it is critical that in building any or reimagining Nigeria as a geographical expression, we must also reimagine and identify and define properly who the Nigerian is and then treat each and every national of that state exactly the same, regardless of where they come from, regardless of whether they are Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, Fulani, Ijo, Ibiobio, TV, Idoma, wherever they come from, Birom, it should not matter if we are truly desirous of building an enduring, resilient future. The biggest problem of Nigeria right now is that even the lie, Decree 24, that pretends to be the constitution of Nigeria, divides Nigerians. It has created multiple divisions, educational disadvantaged state, this one, that one, quota system, federal character, federal principle, all kinds of divisions have been forced on the Nigerian people. Very little has been done to foster a sense of oneness. Nigeria has to be reimagined if it must survive into the future. There have been much cries of marginalization in Nigeria today than there ever were in the years leading up to the Civil War. If Nigeria is going to survive and its current realities should be sufficient to worry, seriously alarm anyone who is in love with the idea of Nigeria, because that is what Nigeria is, an idea. A nation has not been found. The country that was founded is tottering at the brink of the abyss, and the state is failing woefully. It's on the brink of collapse. So, in truth, if Nigeria is going to survive, it will be because it is reimagined. It must be reimagined economically. The state must exist for the good of the lot, not of the few, which is the situation today. We've built a feudal system that caters only to the few, pampers their ego, and does nothing for the lot. That will tell you why you have the weakest situation, where you have Kwam 1, where you have Ibom here. These are merely illustrations of the madness that the society has embraced in the absence of a collective destiny. I am saying that it is possible for Nigeria to become a first world country under 20 years if its resources are harnessed and its people are mobilized to move in the same direction. But if it is not reimagined, it will surely die with cataclysmic effects, not just for the black race, but for humanity itself. I am told one in every 5 black person is a Nigerian. You don't want the refugee problem of that kind of population size. The future of Nigeria is in the hands of the Nigerian. The problems of Nigeria are essentially Nigerian, even though it has foreign foundations. But it is not beyond the ken of the Nigerian to resolve the problems of Nigeria if they'll find the grace. But Nigeria would have to be reimagined if it is to be saved, because it is already destroyed beyond repair, if I may add. But we can reimagine it. It's got sufficient human and material resources, more than enough, to be a first world country in a generation. These are my own opinions. I wish you a fruitful deliberation. And once again, my apologies for not being physically present with you. Have a beautiful deliberation, and God bless you all. Amen.